Hello, everyone. It's me, Chris, and your Generation Y conservative. I am actually flying solo tonight without a guest, but we have some interesting topics to talk about. It's been another interesting week in the news as far as there's always something going on lately. So let's get right into it. With the topics tonight, would you be willing to voluntarily put a chip or implant a chip into your skin if your employer asked you to, that would give you access to the building itself, computers, and also to help pay for your lunches? Do you think that the future even stops right there? Evergreen State University, with the college campus that had the students strolling around with baseball bats to intimidate students that they disagree with, is apparently being sued by one of its professors who has felt threatened in the heightened state on the campus grounds. A famous female hunter known to post pictures of her kills on social media has committed suicide after endless threats on her life and her family's by wildlife activists. She didn't do anything illegal, but what do you have to say about it? Also, one of the bigger topics this week, the repeal of Obamacare, or repeals in this case, with what was being voted on this week, have failed, including the skinny repeal, which we'll talk about. While on the Senate floor, Senator John McCain makes a passionate claim to his colleagues. We will break down his speech almost line for line in a little bit on that as well. Ben Shapiro and Adam Carolla appeared before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee on Thursday to discuss and identify the harms of infringing on the right to free speech on college campuses, and also to give recommendations on how to encourage and protect the First Amendment rights. We'll take a look at that and discuss some of the highlights from that 3-hour meeting. Trust me, I only have 3 clips from it to save you from that. Also, President Trump tweeted that transgenders are no longer welcome in the United States military. Do you agree or disagree? I think that there's points on both sides of the argument, and I'm going to dive into that and see if we can come up with a conclusion for it. So we'll discuss that a little bit. Also in the news, came out this afternoon that Charlie Gard, the 11-month-old who was fighting for his life while his parents fought the oppressive universal healthcare system of England to keep him alive, has passed away. As if the details behind his story weren't horrifying enough, we find out that the parents were denied the ability to bring him home to die surrounded by family in his house instead of hospice. We begin there on the Generation Y Conservative Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Generation Y Conservative Podcast, where the truth matters more than agenda, and you'll find out more and more as we go on with the podcast that I just don't have time for the BS of people trying to push their agendas over truth, especially when fake news comes out of people being attacked by certain members of the other party, and then it comes out that it's not true, and people don't seem to want to update others on that. You can follow me on social media. You might be watching right now with the live podcast. We usually do this on Thursdays or Fridays. Sometimes I have a guest. It looks like tonight I'm actually flying solo on that. But what you want to do is head to the Facebook page for the Generation Y Conservative and hit the like button, and then head over to the following button and go down to the drop-down menu on that and get notifications. That way you will be notified when we go live with any podcast or other videos, as we have a couple other ones in the works as far as different things. We also post up right now movie reviews on that page, as well as hitting news throughout the week that I find interesting and typically ends up in the podcast anyway. You can also follow me on YouTube and subscribe to my channel there, and once you subscribe, it'll give you the option to click on a bell for notifications on that as well. And I would actually encourage you to do the Facebook notifications and also the notifications for YouTube to follow along with any person or channel that you find interesting, because it will actually push those notifications to you when videos are published or someone's actually going live. And I find that really useful because of the nature of the internet game right now. A lot of commentary voices are actually being pushed down and repressed, basically, in the system. So you want to do that. Also, you can interact with me on Twitter at GenYConservative without the E on the end if you're watching right now on any of the videos, whether it's the live stream or the YouTube version that comes out a couple days later. You can actually see all this information along the bottom of the screen. But One of the other things that you should know is that the internet radio station KLRN Internet Radio actually runs my podcast on Sundays from 3 to 6 p.m., so you can tune in then and also go to their iTunes account, search for the Generation Y Conservative or KLRN Radio, and find all my podcasts on iTunes as well, so you can subscribe to that and listen to it on the go. This month's spotlighted charity is still Angel 34. Angel 34 is a national organization dedicated to the fight against childhood cancers, something that hits a little close to home if you know me, as a survivor of cancer myself. Quick story on that. I don't know if I've actually told this before, but one of the places I actually went to get treatment for my cancer was a hospital branch that the children's wing and the adult wing were both in the same area. And so when you're waiting in the waiting room to go in and see your doctor for treatment, and you see little kids that have to come in and get cancer treatments as well, I don't think that you can really grasp the gravity of it unless you've been in that kind of actual situation. So I would encourage you to check out Angel 34. And they actually have an event coming up this year. It's a little bit away. It's September 16th. But you can join Angel 34 at the Arts Quest on Saturday, September 16th for the second annual Angel 34 and South Italy Imports International Food and Wine Festival. They need to work on that title. All proceeds from this event go to the Family Assistance Fund at Lehigh Valley Children's Hospital and the Angel 34 Foundation. So this is here in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. The Arts Quest building is actually by the Sands Casino in Bethlehem, in case you aren't familiar with the area, but you want to head in for it if you're in one of the tri-state areas. This event will feature 5 huge tents with food, wine, beer, and activities, chefs from Italy, Las Vegas, and the Lehigh Valley region here, cooking demonstrations, live and silent auctions, also a Notre Dame football on the big screen while that's going on, an exotic car display. Now, let me just clue you in on something here. I actually worked for the car dealership that brought the exotic cars last year down to this, and I got to drive the Ferrari California T to the event and a Lamborghini Huracan back from the event. So I know that some of those cars are going to be making an appearance again. I am no longer with the company, so I don't care what I say. I wouldn't bring my politics into my job when I was working there, but yeah, there's going to be some really neat exotic cars as well as a really cool racing car as well that'll be there. There'll be live music all day, plus there will be a raffle to win a 2-year lease on a brand new Maserati. I'm guessing it's probably the Ghibli, which is a ton of fun to drive. I've driven every type of Maserati now, and it's a good time. So you definitely want to enter for that. Tickets for the general session cost $50, and this includes admission to the Food and Wine Festival plus all food and drinks. You can also get a VIP ticket for $100, which includes admission to the Food and Wine Festival plus access to the VIP tent with a steak dinner from Outback Steakhouse. Hopefully they have a bloomin' onion there. Deluxe burgers from Red Robin and special select wines from South Italy Imports, as well as select craft beers from Allentown Beverage. VIPs will also enjoy live music throughout the day at the VIP tent. So I would encourage everyone who's interested in volunteering or donating to the charity or just checking out one of these events, why don't you head over to their website, which is www.angel34.org, and that's the number 34, not spelled out. So I know that I've gone over these details a couple times on Charlie Gard over in England, and in case you haven't heard the details, I want to go over a quick overview of what Charlie has been going through lately. If you have been following along for the last couple weeks on this podcast or heard for the last several months about the Charlie Gard story, you know how screwed up this situation is. Charlie has had a mitochondrial disease that has robbed him of his muscle and brain function, leaving him deaf and blind. Despite raising $1.7 million to seek experimental treatment outside of the UK, specifically here in the US, the family's passports were blocked and Charlie was confined to the hospital, and the parents were told he should be taken off of life support to, quote, die with dignity. President Trump and the Pope both show their support and offered to help. President Trump specifically said he would help get Charlie Gard over into our country. And on top of that, just last week, Congress voted to help the Gard family get over here despite the blockade from the UK not allowing them to come over, that they were actually going to extract the family and try to help them out, which was pretty cool on their part. The European Council of Human Rights essentially became a death panel, deciding the fate of poor Charlie. This is exactly what we've been talking about since 2008, to be honest with you, is we kept on getting into this discussion on the healthcare system here in the United States, what it entails and what we've been doing as far as the battles in Congress over the Democrats versus the Republicans, and what the Democrats wanted versus what the Republican side wanted or conservatives wanted, because quite frankly, we'll be talking about John McCain later, who's a progressive who probably wants a universal healthcare system more than a free market system. But during that process, back then, when John McCain was actually running against President Obama, Sarah Palin, as well as some others on the right, and especially in regards to commentary on the right, got into a lot of trouble when they were bringing up death panels, that under a universal healthcare system, there would always be a type of panel involved that would take into consideration people's lives. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, that there's a sweet spot for people that are seeking medical treatment, especially in drastic cases, where the people between the ages of, let's say, 18 and 34 are this sweet spot where people younger than 18, a panel would look at their situation and say, well, they have some great organs, they haven't lived that long, they didn't experience life so much at this point, so we don't have to worry about them, we'll take their organs and give it to that sweet spot area. And then you have the people over the age of 34 that they say, well, these people have lived long enough, they lived a fulfilling life, and we can either take their organs and harvest them for that sweet spot again, or completely take them off of the support system that everybody's paying into and not have to spend an exorbitant amount of money on actually keeping them alive. A lot of people got in trouble for bringing up death panels and what that entails, and they left with saying that this is not something that would happen, and yet here we are looking at this case as a prime example that the European Council of Human Rights said that Charlie should die with dignity. And they actively worked with the UK government to block the Gard family from actually seeking experimental treatment that may help him in another country. And as we discussed before, whether this was a 1% chance or a 0.001% chance, it is up to the family to decide how they're going to seek treatment for their children. And we're going to learn a little bit here, too, that there are some that believe once a person or a child specifically enters into a hospital system, it is no longer a parent's child. It is the responsibility of the hospital to take over parental control and rights within that situation and decide the medical fate of that individual, which is pretty sickening. And I don't think a lot of people actually realize the drastic nature that goes into a universal healthcare system. We're getting a little bit away from Charlie Gard and everything, but in the past, when I was running the Generation Y conservative blog before the podcast and everything, I had written about stories where people were pulling their own teeth with pliers and filling their cavities with super glue. In Canada, people, if they believe that they have cancer, or if the doctor even believes that they may have cancer, you go on a waiting list for up to 6 months sometimes to get a biopsy just to find out if you have cancer. Well, I just mentioned before in regards to Angel 34, I did have cancer, and I can tell you right now that it wasn't until 2 months of misdiagnosis by a local doctor that things deteriorated so fast. It was like me stepping out in the traffic and getting hit by a semi-truck. Had I been on a 6-month waiting list just to get a biopsy done to find out what was going on with me, they would have called and my wife would have said that I had died 3 months ago. So these are the types of things that go into these universal healthcare systems that people don't realize it affects. The overflow of patients that happen when healthcare becomes free and people use the ER system and the hospital as everyday remedies, or remedy rooms, I guess you could say, for situations that don't require that they could actually wait for a doctor visit. overwhelmed the hospital so much that just a couple years ago, the waiting time in the ERs in Europe were so long, specifically in England, I believe it was, that they had a regulation within the hospitals that said that a person shouldn't be waiting for so long after a certain point. I think it was like 3 hours in the ER until they reach the doctors to receive treatment. So what they did, instead of remedying the situation and trying to figure out how to better do this system and get people in there faster, what they decided to do was hold people in the ambulances outside until their time was coming up, then move them into the hospital because the clock started when they walked into the ER, and then they would be closer to that time to actually go in and receive treatment. So now they've caused a new problem. Now ambulances are being tied up and waiting outside the hospitals with patients inside and are no longer able to go out and get other people that may need the help. So the universal healthcare system has and always will set up a set of hurdles, one after the other. As soon as you put another hurdle up, it's one after that. Or as soon as you jump one, there's another hurdle. It's never ending. And again, while there's people on the left, specifically I Effing Love Science, the blog website that has argued against Charlie Gard being kept alive, as well as this other person I'm going to talk about shortly, an ethics professor, I think it was, in regards to universal health care. These are people that don't really care about life anymore. And if you don't care about life in the womb, it's going to overflow into not caring about life in general. I should have actually pulled up a clip of this English woman who a couple years ago in an interview said that she would be the first one, if her child was suffering an extreme illness, she would be the first one to want to help that child by putting a pillow over its face and smothering it to death.
No, and I think that if I were a mother of a suffering child, I would be the first to want, a deeply suffering child, I would be the first to want to put a pillow over its face.
Dr. Peter Evans
as I would with any suffering thing. And I think the difference is that my feeling of horror at suffering is much greater than my feeling of getting rid of a couple of cells, because suffering can go on for years.
I'm sorry, I was just about to introduce another guest there, but that's a pretty horrifying thing to say, that you would put a pillow over.
Of course I would, if it was a child I really loved who was in agony. I think any good mother would.
And she thought it was compassionate that she would be able to do that to her own children. And it's a complete lack of respect for life. In this case here with Charlie Gard, there was a percentage chance that the treatments here that were experimental could have saved his life, but that has come to an end now. So his parents are not married. I don't really know the situation on that. That's not really important, but obviously his father's last name is Gard and his mother's last name is Yates, so just so you know as I'm reading this. Gard and Yates had initially requested that Charlie be allowed to spend his final days at home. They were forced to accept moving him into hospice, where they asked to spend a week with Charlie and a private medical team. The Great Ormond Street Hospital also objected to that request, arguing that it is not in Charlie's best interest to spend additional time in a hospice. On Thursday, High Court Judge Nicholas Francis finalized a plan to send Charlie to hospice, where he said the baby's life support would be removed shortly after, which will inevitably result in Charlie's death. Yates told the BBC, "We just want some peace with our son. No hospital, no lawyers, no courts, no media, just quality time with Charlie away from everything to say goodbye to him in the most loving way. Most people won't ever have to go through what we have been through. We've had no control over our son's life and no control over our son's death. Despite us and our legal team working tirelessly to arrange this near impossible task, the judge has ordered against what we arranged and has agreed to what the GOSH asked." So despite multiple court appearances, the Gard family finally decided earlier this week that their son's health had finally deteriorated too far beyond repair, and they were going to remove life support today, Friday, July 28th. So I was sitting in my car as I was listening to this news update this morning that Charlie had passed away, and I blame the universal healthcare system and the European Council for Human Rights and everyone involved in this decision in the courts over there that completely and utterly blocked at every single turn this family from getting treatment for their son, whether it would work or not. Now, we discussed last week that one of the reasons why they would probably not want to allow this family to go and get treatments is because if they did allow that and they got out of the universal healthcare system and actually sought treatment that would have fixed Charlie, or at least stopped it, possibly long enough for him to seek advanced treatment in the future that would come out with new studies and possibly reverse course, is because they would be setting a precedent for the rest of their patients that would allow in the future a precedent for more families to seek treatment elsewhere out of the universal healthcare system. And in essence, by doing so, would prove that the universal healthcare system that they live in and under the thumb of is an oppressive system. So as I was sitting there thinking about this today, about the deterioration that Charlie has gone through over the last 11 months, had the parents been allowed to take this $1.7 million or more that they raised from donors all over the world to seek this experimental treatment months ago, we may not be in the type of situation we are today that Charlie had to be removed from life support. There was another child in the U.S. that actually used the same doctor that they wanted to use that had the same type of condition, and while he's still wheelchair bound, he's 6 years old, living, has motor function, can see, can play. I don't know if he can speak. But again, what if 2 years from now that condition doesn't get any worse and there is a treatment that comes out that can reverse this course somehow? They're doing different things all the time with the Human Genome Project, stem cell research and everything. So what if we were able to do that in the near future, and instead we look back on history at this case and see that there were people involved that actively wanted to stop Charlie from living, from having a chance to receive that. And as I was saying, over the last couple months, his health has deteriorated to the point where there was no longer an option but to remove him from life support. And as I was sitting there thinking about this, I thought, as an analogy, sometimes when you accidentally pour ice cubes into the sink, or you pour out a drink and the ice cubes go into your sink, I don't know if you're like me, but there's been times where I pick up an ice cube and I turn the water faucet on hot and I start to slowly move the ice cube under that water and watch it slowly melt away, or in some cases fast, depending on how hot the water is. And that's really what we have here, is eventually you get down to a point where it becomes a thin sheet of ice and so brittle that it breaks apart in your hand. And that is where Charlie was at the end of his time here at this week. Instead of pulling back from that hot water and allowing something to happen to try and fix it or stop it, put the ice cube back in the freezer for it to at least maintain its structure as it was. Maybe not reverse course, but at least maintain where he was. Maybe something could have happened in that amount of time. So I myself have been really, really upset by this. I hope that this story doesn't go away. I was discussing this with my wife, and she said, yeah, it's a big story now. This week it's going to be a big story, but with the way things have been going, people use Charlie for their case, either for or against healthcare right now, universal healthcare. And by next week, there's going to be a new story that may not even deal with healthcare, and people will have forgotten Charlie. Well, I hope for Charlie's sake, and future cases like his, that is not the case, that we remember Charlie and certainly pray for his family right now, and try to fix these types of systems that exist in the world that would stop a family from seeking treatment that would have moved heaven and earth to get this treatment for him. Charlie's mother, Connie Yates, told the Daily Mail, "Our beautiful little boy has gone. We are so proud of you, Charlie. We could not be prouder of him, and we will miss him terribly. His body, heart, and soul may soon be gone, but his spirit will live on for eternity, and he will make a difference in people's lives for years to come. We will make sure of that." Charlie Gard would have been a year old coming up next week on August 4th. So we're talking about another voice in opposition to this, and specifically this guy's name is Ian Kennedy, who is a professor of health law and ethics at University College in London, and he was writing at The Guardian, has taken a different stance on this, which is one that is consistent with the leftist ideology of universal health care. And he said that Charlie Gard does not belong to his parents. He belongs to the hospital or the government itself. He said that the first is the most fundamental. As a society, we must choose how to decide such heartbreaking cases, which I doubt he believes is actually heartbreaking. Despite Charlie Gard's tragic story, we must respect the process of our courts. These are the steps. The first is to recognize that children do not belong to their parents, he wrote. Second, when a claim is made that parents have rights over their children, it is important to step back and examine the language used. We need to remind ourselves that parents do not have rights regarding their children. They only have duties, the principal duty being to act in their children's best interests. This has been part of the fabric of our law and our society for a long time. Third, if we are concerned with the language of rights, it is, of course, children who have rights. Any rights that parents have exist only to protect their children's rights. So, again, what they're saying here is that the parents don't actually have any rights. That's left to Big Brother, essentially, of the government and the hospitals to choose how that person lives or dies and have complete disregard for the parents' say in the matter. It's pretty disgusting. There has to be a mechanism to decide the circumstances in which parents' views should not prevail. This is exactly what he said. That mechanism has to be a trustworthy and independent source of authority, sometimes a local authority, but ultimately, as ever in a civil society, a court. So, in case you don't quite understand what they're saying there, they're saying that the that the life of someone like Charlie should be decided by a court. Or in other words, as the left doesn't want to hear, a death panel. So that's the update on Charlie. Unfortunately, as of this afternoon, Charlie Gard has passed on, and I send out my prayers to the family. I know that a lot of people, Mike included, who's usually on the podcast, probably does as well. And I just pray for the comfort of that family, because they are in for some rough emotional times over the coming span of time. It's going to take a while. So moving on, one of Evergreen University's professors that has been at the forefront of the news regarding the hostile actions taken by the vigilante students on campus has reportedly filed a $3.85 million lawsuit against the campus for being, quote, racially hostile. Brett Weinstein, the Evergreen State College professor who was surrounded by an angry mob of students who wanted him fired after he refused to leave campus during a day of absence for whites in May, reportedly filed a tort claim form against the school for $3.85 million, according to documents obtained by Campus Reform. The attorney involved told the outlet that the claim was, quote, for the hostile work environment that has been fostered at the college over the past year or so, adding that there was no current litigation, as a tort claim must be filed at least 60 days prior to initiating legal action in the state of Washington. Among hundreds of pages of documents Campus Reform said it obtained was a letter to the campus and Brett Weinstein from some Jews bent on the destruction of white supremacy, that was in quotes, which demands Weinstein's firing. They said in the letter, "We want to talk about the ways that Weinstein is positioning himself as a Jew to invalidate the claims of racism being raised against him. Brett Weinstein is wrong. He has put you in danger, and we will not allow him to hide behind our histories in order to dodge responsibility for his abhorrent and reprehensible words and actions." According to Campus Reform, it ends, or at least concludes with, "No cops on campus. Fire Brett Weinstein. Black Lives Matter." So, There's been multiple cases of videos coming out on this. One of the ones that we showed in a previous podcast was of a bunch of students that look like the Joker from the Batman series, like one of his reject minions following him around. It looks like a couple of them, just completely insane liberals on campus, carrying around baseball bats and chasing down students that support Trump, in this case. Not ones that cause trouble or anything. In one case, I still haven't looked this up. I don't know the history behind this, that Pepe the Frog thing, but a kid drew that in chalk on a sidewalk, and they chased him down with a baseball bat for it. Didn't say anything, demeaning or offensive or racist on it or anything. They chased him down for a chalk drawing. But there was one disturbing cell phone video that shows students cursing out and ordering around a visibly shaken school president, George Bridges, who bowed to protester demands, even agreeing to relieve them of homework requirements. So this is like a class of kindergarten students or first or second graders that don't want homework assignments and feel like it's too much and it's so oppressive to them, cornering their teacher and holding them hostage until their demands are met. That's exactly how these kids are acting. And let's not be fooled. These are not young adults. They're not adults. These are petty children that should be in diapers still. I'm surprised that they actually have motor function over their relieving systems, that they are mature enough to handle that, because they are acting like a bunch of pansies. In June, students reportedly began community policing with baseball bats, which is what I was talking about earlier. Later that month, a video report featured leftist students who said they wanted to weed out those who oppose them. F free speech, one student said in one of the videos. And students and faculty members, including Weinstein, spoke out to Evergreen's trustees about the deteriorating conditions on campus at a meeting, I believe it was last month. Weinstein said, "Do you know that the college descended into literal anarchy? For days, the campus was not under control of the state. It was under the control of protesters. There were assaults, there were batteries, there was pressure not to report crimes to police. People were, by the legal definition, I believe, kidnapped and imprisoned. That included faculty members and administrators. Others were hunted on campus." The school administration subsequently notified students that their intimidating actions were illegal and could result in criminal charges. Damn right. First of all, there are videos, there are pictures of these students out there, and this shouldn't have to happen again for them to be prosecuted under a crime. These students were walking around with baseball bats, intimidating and chasing down students that they just disagreed with. There was no action that instigated an attack on these students for something like defending themselves against an attack from the person that they were chasing down. These are people, these are things that are using violence, and it's something that's happening a lot more since last year with everything that's been going on with the election of Trump and everything. It was going on during the primaries, it was going on during the general election, that the left has become completely unhinged and mentally unstable. And I don't like attacking the left when it isn't in regards to the politicians down in D.C., because I believe that they're responsible for the brunt of most of the things that happen in this country. But when you have people in the streets that are protesting and shutting down the free speech of others, using violent actions to shut down other people, or looting and rioting for absolutely no reason other than to do it, these are animals that need to be taken under control. And as a matter of fact, I wouldn't be so opposed to dealing with these people that are cowards, in my mind, covering their faces with bandanas so that they aren't seen. That's exactly what a coward would do. I wouldn't mind sending out a mass animal control to go around with those lassos that on the end of poles, getting them around the neck and putting them into the back of vehicles that way, because they're acting like animals. And if they want to act like animals, then we should treat them like animals, as far as I'm concerned. This is not contributing to a civil society. Protesting in that manner, you have every right to protest. Protesting is an American right, so to speak. It falls under the First Amendment. But when you get violent, when you destroy other people's property, when you destroy other people, that is no longer, that's infringing on other people's rights at that point, which null and voids your right at that point. So, yeah, I think that we should be taking as much legal action against everyone that we can get that is participating in these violent protests and make an example of them. Okay, so this is going to be fun. In a related story to this campus free speech stuff, Carolla and Ben Shapiro testified against campus social justice warrior attacks on free speech in front of Congress this week. And according to the Blaze, comedian Carolla and the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro appeared before the House Oversight Committee and Government Reform Committee on Thursday to discuss and identify the harms of infringing on the right to free speech on college campuses and also give recommendations on how to encourage and protect First Amendment rights. Representative Jim Jordan, a Republican of Ohio who chaired the hearing, began by showing a video of a recent campus riots and protests led by leftist students and activist groups. The intent of each incident was to shut down free speech either through shouting down ideological opponents or threatening physical danger. He said, "This is where it all ends. You start with safe spaces, and it ends with students holding hostage the president of a university," speaking specifically of Evergreen. "That's why we're having this hearing," Jordan said, noting that the incident at Evergreen State University in Olympia, Washington, which is when social justice active students issued specific demands of President George Bridges. In order to understand what's been going on at some of our college campuses, it's necessary to explore the ideology that provides the impetus for a lot of the protesters who violently obstruct events, pull fire alarms, assault professors, and even other students, and the impetus for the administrators who all too often humor these protesters," said Ben Shapiro. The first step is that they say the validity or invalidity of an argument can be judged solely by the ethnic, sexual, racial, or cultural identity of the person making the argument. Carolla also testified, recalling the days when he would tour college campuses and opposing ideas were welcomed. He said, "We need the adults to start acting like adults. Our plan is to put them in a bubble right now, keep them away from everything, and somehow they'll come out stronger than when they emerge from that bubble." Well, that's not happening. Could the faculty and administrators on these campuses act like faculty and administration? So let's take a look at some of the highlights from the Shapiro and Carolla testimony, and we'll discuss some of that afterwards then. So this is Ben Shapiro and his first initial comments in regards to his testimony in front of Congress.
Mr. Shapiro.
It's an honor to testify. It's an honor to testify before you here today. The reason that I'm with you is that I speak on dozens of college campuses every year, so I have some firsthand experience with the anti-First Amendment activities that have been taking place on the college campuses. I've encountered anti-free speech measures, administrative cowardice, even physical violence at campuses ranging from California State University at Los Angeles to University of Wisconsin at Madison, which is driving the legislation that Ms. Demings was talking about, to Penn State University to UC Berkeley, and I am not alone. In order to understand what's been going on at some of our college campuses, it's necessary to explore the ideology that provides the impetus for a lot of the protesters who violently obstruct events, pull fire alarms, assault professors and even other students, and the impetus for administrators who all too often humor these protesters. Free speech is under assault because of a three-step argument made by the advocates and justifiers of violence. The first step is they say that the validity or invalidity of an argument can be judged solely by the ethnic, sexual, racial, or cultural identity of the person making the argument. The second step is that they claim those who say otherwise are engaging in what they call verbal violence. And the final step is they conclude that physical violence is sometimes justified in order to stop such verbal violence. So let's examine each of these three steps in turn. First, the philosophy of intersectionality. This philosophy now dominates college campuses as well as a large segment, unfortunately, of today's Democratic Party, and suggests that straight white Americans are inherently the beneficiaries of white privilege and therefore cannot speak on certain policies, since they have not experienced what it's like to be black or Hispanic or gay or transgender or a woman. This philosophy ranks the value of a view not based on the logic or merit of the view, but on the level of victimization in American society experienced by the person espousing the view. Therefore, if you're an LGBT black woman, your view of American society is automatically more valuable than that of a straight white male. The next step in the logic is obvious. If a straight white male, or anybody else who ranks lower on the victimhood scale, says something contrary to the viewpoint of the higher-ranking intersectionality identity, that person has engaged in a microaggression. As NYU social psychologist Jonathan Haidt writes, microaggressions are small actions or word choices that seem on their face to have no malicious intent, but that are thought of as a kind of violence nonetheless. You don't have to actively say anything insulting to microaggress. Somebody merely needs to take offense. If, for example, you say that society ought to be colorblind, you're microaggressing certain identity groups who have been victimized by a non-colorblind society. Note, microaggressions, as the name suggests, are not merely insults. They are aggressions. They are the equivalent to physical violence. Just 2 weeks ago, psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett of Northeastern University published an essay in the New York Times suggesting that words should be seen as physical violence because they can cause stress, and stress causes physical harm. Thus, Feldman suggested it is reasonable, scientifically speaking, to ban or restrict speech you do not like at your school. This is both inane and dangerous. That's because it leads to the final logical step. Words you don't like deserve to be fought physically. When I spoke at California State University at LA, one professor threatened students who sponsored me by offering to fight them. He then posted a slogan on the door of his office stating, "The best response to microaggression is macroaggression." As Haidt writes, this is why the idea that speech is violence is so dangerous. It tells the members of a generation already beset by anxiety and depression that the world is a far more violent and threatening place than it really is. It tells them that words, ideas, speakers can literally kill them. Even worse, at a time of rapidly rising political polarization in the United States, it helps a small subset of that generation justify political violence. Indeed, protesters all too often engage in physically violent disruption when they believe their identity group is under verbal attack by someone, usually conservative but not always. Not only do some administrators look the other way, at Middlebury College, Cal State LA, Berkeley, Evergreen, actual crimes were committed and almost nobody has been arrested. But they actively forbid events from moving forward, creating a heckler's veto. The notion that if you are physically violent enough, you can get administrators to kowtow to you, to bow before you, by canceling an event you disagree with altogether. All of this destroys free speech. But just as importantly, it turns students into snowflakes, craven and pathetic, looking for an excuse to be offended so they can earn points in the intersectionality Olympics and then use those points as a club with which to beat opponents. A healthy nation requires an emotionally and intellectually vigorous population ready to engage in open debate at all times. Shielding college students from opposing viewpoints makes them simultaneously weaker and more dangerous. We must fight that process at every step. And that begins by acknowledging that whatever we think about America and where we stand, we must agree on this fundamental principle. All of our views should be judged on their merits, not on the color or sex or sexual orientation of the speaker, and those views should never be banned on the grounds that they offend someone.
So what Shapiro is saying here is that we have actually come into a system now where free speech is determined on its value based on who is actually speaking it, instead of putting value in everyone's free speech. Throughout this hearing, you actually had members of Congress that kept on referring to Shapiro, who's extremely eloquent with his words, precise like a dagger, referring to him and some of the other people on the panel as white supremacists. I mean, that's what was coming off as, and it's just ridiculous that we have lowered our standards of how we treat each other by labeling people who we disagree with, especially coming from the left, by labeling people on the right as racists and white supremacists. Ben Shapiro was on point with that, and you can check out more of that in the final podcast because I accidentally cut it short. But let's go over to Adam Carolla and see what he had to say in his opening statements.
5 minutes.
Thank you. It's an honor to be asked to speak in front of you all. First, just a quick piece of business. Do we get to keep these pads? This is going to be huge. And not that I'm going to, but what do you reckon they'll get on eBay? I'm not saying I'm going to. It's pure curiosity. I'm not as eloquent as Mr. Shapiro. I sort of speak in beats and off the top of my head, and I've written a few down for you all today. First off, I come from a very blue-collar background. I grew up in North Hollywood, California. My dad was a school teacher, and my mom received welfare and food stamps, and told me very importantly when I was young, when I asked her if she would get a job, she said, "And lose my welfare benefits? No, thank you," which taught me a very valuable lesson, which was never to listen to my mom. All right. I ended up being a carpenter and then a boxing instructor, and met Jimmy Kimmel when I taught him to box for a morning zoo stunt, and eventually made my way onto TV and radio. In the early days of my career, I toured the country with Dr. Drew when we were on Loveline together, a syndicated radio program also on MTV, and we must have played 100 college campuses with nary a word of negativity, and no safe spaces and no stuffed animals being handed out. Simply went there, said our piece. Many controversial ideas were exchanged, and that's just what they were, exchanged. And then we got our paychecks and went home, and 15 years later, I went out with Dennis Prager, conservative talk show host, and attempted to do a show at Cal State Northridge, where my mother was an actual graduate from, with a Chicano Studies degree, believe it or not. So she's rolling in dough about now. And they pulled the plug on it. They gave us no good reason why we couldn't speak there, and we actually had to get attorneys involved to go back and speak at a later date. We're talking a lot about the kids, and I think they're just that, kids. We are the adults, and I don't think we are doing the children. I mean, these are 18 and 19-year-old kids that are at these college campuses. They grew up dipped in Purell, playing soccer games where they never kept score, and watching Wah Wah Wubsy. And we're asking them to be mature. We need the adults to start being the adults. Studies have shown that if you take people and you put them in a zero-gravity environment, like astronauts, they lose muscle mass, they lose bone density. We're taking these kids in the name of protection, we're putting them in a zero-gravity environment, and they're losing muscle mass and bone density. They need to live in a world that has gravity. When you need to expose your children to germs and dirt in the environment to build up their immune system. Our plan is put them in a bubble, keep them away from everything, and somehow they'll come out stronger when they emerge from the bubble. Well, that's not happening. Children are the future, but we are the present, and we're the adults, and we need to act like it. And I feel that what's going on these campuses is we need law and order. We need to bring back law and order, but I think if we just had order, we wouldn't need law. So could we just bring back order, and could the faculty and administration on these campuses act like faculty and administration, and most importantly, adults who are in charge of these kids who need some gravity in their life? Thank you.
So that was Adam Carolla. He actually has, I believe, still the #1 podcast on iTunes right now, and was actually one of the pioneers of podcasting, I believe. Him and Joe Rogan have always been on top of the game with that. But Adam Carolla actually brought up a couple really good, interesting points. Let's go back to his point about the analogy that he said of people going up into space and astronauts being in space, and as they're up there, over a span of time, they start to lose their muscle mass and bone density. Well, in a recent interview I heard with the author of a book called Friction, he was actually on Glenn Beck's program either yesterday or today, I forget which, but he was actually talking about how the brain is, in essence, a muscle, and that we can actually, by focusing on certain areas and doing different things, especially in regards to creativity, that we can actually increase the size of certain portions of our brains by simply doing repeated tasks of different things and focusing on creativeness. And one of the things they mentioned was, instead of waking up and immediately checking out your phone and shutting off that creative portion of your brain, instead wake up and take a shower, because it starts this whole process of, that's where it's funny, because that's where you get all your best ideas. I don't know if it's maybe just me, but I hear that a lot too, is you think a lot more in the shower. And he said that that's actually because of that creative portion kicking in. Now, that being said, to go along with what Adam Carolla was saying, is that these kids are not exercising their brains enough on college campuses. And the only way that you can exercise a young adult's brain is to challenge it, okay? And in a lot of cases across the United States right now, and to be honest with you, across the world, we're actually seeing a one ideology mentality being taught on college campuses. It used to be a running joke that the conservative right would always say that there's liberal professors and they're indoctrinating students and everything, and the left would say, oh, this is ridiculous, it's not really that bad in college campuses. And you say it nowadays, and they're like, well, yeah, this is the right way of thinking. Of course we're teaching that way. Which is just another example of the progressive agenda here in America. But free speech is extremely important, because I think if you were to ask anyone 10 years ago what the function and goal of colleges was, they would say that it's to prepare students to enter the workforce by molding them into citizens that are well-rounded individuals, to be able to enter into that workforce and do so without causing a friction among the other coworkers that they enter with, because it prepares them for that situation instead of being a fish out of water. And what we're finding, though, is that these kids are all being taught the same thing. They're not being challenged in their ideological viewpoints that is being forced down their throats in these university classroom settings. And what you have is the inability on the parts of the professors and colleges to teach down the middle and give the pros and cons of both sides in regards to politics and stuff, the pros and cons of the left, the pros and cons of the right, and then challenge the students to either pick and defend their point of view, or pick an opposing point of view and try to defend that, which is actually even more creative and requires a lot more attention to detail and work on behalf of that student. If you were to ask me to take a liberal standpoint and defend it, I would be able to do that, because I know the arguments that are against people like myself in the conservative ideological viewpoint, which is important to know, because if you know the opposing viewpoint, you can argue your viewpoint better. But that's not being taught today, and university college campuses are putting out sheets of cookie-cutter students that all think and believe the same way, and are coming out feeling that they're entitled to certain things in the workforce. They do no longer believe in the ladder of accomplishment, that you move up a ladder to gain certain positions. They believe that if you put enough time into college to prepare for the workforce, that you're automatically entitled to a management position. And they scoff at internship possibilities or entry-level jobs. They're just not willing to accept that, which goes to show in the statistics of what you're seeing across the country with the amount of jobs that are available that just aren't being filled by people, because you have a generation of people that feel that they're entitled to something more than that entry-level position because they got a college degree. Well, that's not the case. I would actually argue more nowadays that a college education has become less and less important than merely trying to use an entry-level position or internship to apprentice within a job workforce environment to learn the industry. Because to be honest with you, all the jobs I've had in regards to marketing, which is what I went for, and graphic design, there was not much done that was done in college that transferred over to that, except for some skills on Photoshop and knowing certain things in marketing plans. But even that, if you go into any company, their marketing plan is put together always almost drastically differently. So I think that you get more experience by actually starting a job. And if you're going to do that, you might as well start from the bottom, work your way up so you know every angle of the company as you progress through it and become a manager or CEO or president or eventually own your own business. I think that these things are very important. So we talked about the muscle memory. We're talking about, he obviously brought up a lot of really good points on the culture of where we've been going with students nowadays. This participation trophy stuff where, participation trophies in sports has led to this generation of people that feel like when they complete a task in the workforce, that they need a pat on the back to get recognition that they did a good job. And if they don't receive that, they start worrying and wondering and stressing out and having anxiety and everything. Well, you don't get a pat on the back all the time. And in regards to the assimilation with the current workforce, that is another problem that we're having, is that instead of assimilating into the workforce and becoming one and preparing the students for that assimilation, instead we have students that are being groomed to enter the workforce for the workforce to change for them. Now, within the last couple of years, there were stories of lecture meetings and company retreats where the companies would actually go to prepare themselves for the millennial workforce to enter. And how can we cater to this generation? How can we change the business model to cater to these kids, to foster their creativity and give them more vacation time and allow them to sleep in longer? No. That is absolutely ridiculous. It's time for these kids to grow up and become adults. There is a certain way of doing things. Listen, I worked in commodity markets for a while with Ben, who has been on the podcast, and I'm sorry, but you can't sleep in on those days because the markets open at a certain time and close at a certain time in the United States, and foreign markets open at a certain time and close at a certain time, and they're not going to wait for people to wake up and get going. That's not the way the world works. It's not the workforce assimilating to these kids. It's the kids that have to assimilate to adulthood, and we are not seeing that right now. So I did get one more point from Shapiro in this hearing and testimony of his, and I thought it was an extremely good one, and we can talk a little bit more about it after you watch it here.
Everyone is trying to focus in on this term hate crime and hate speech. But the important part of those phrases is not the first word. It's speech versus crime. So if there's a crime that's being committed, we're all in agreement. If somebody commits a crime and they're speaking of an imminent threat to somebody, of course that's a crime. But that has very little to do with the hate and a lot more to do with the crime as to whether that's prosecuted, because hate speech is not prosecutable, nor should it be policed by the campus. So the fact is that what we are seeing is a conflation between speech and active attempts to obstruct in order to promote the obstruction by some administrators on a few colleges.
So he brings up an excellent point here, which is that we have, over the last couple months specifically, since the general election win by President Trump, have seen an influx in activity among the younger generations that feel that hate speech, or what they label as hate speech, which is merely just anything that offends them, as being an actual crime. Now, Ben Shapiro makes a very good point that when you break down this term of hate speech, what you get are two different things. You have people focusing on the word hate instead of focusing on the freedom of speech. Hate is not a prosecutable crime, and unless you're actually taking violent action to support that hate. And so what we see is a lot of people conflating the two issues together and saying that mere speech and the ability to offend someone is something that should be prosecuted under the law. And that's just not the case. One of the best things I ever heard is that the speech that you should defend the most is the speech that you disagree with. Because if the same is done on the other side, we are all given the opportunity to voice our opinions in a free environment that's full of liberty. Whether we disagree or agree with those people, it at least allows the opportunity to foster ideas. Now, One of the things I've brought up in the past is the fact that I was on a school board in my local area here, and while I had the Women's League of Voters, the liberals on the board itself, the teachers union, as well as some others active in the community, liberal members of the community, actively working to get me off of the board, not because of any vote that I took, not because of any concerns that I raised, because actually I believe that, especially if you talk to people, I did a lot more listening than I did, speaking out against anything in the board meetings, because I got the perspective of everyone. These people worked to get me off of the school board. It didn't work, by the way, and I was actually reelected to the board. Even after I pulled out of the election, I took it. So, suck it. But the fact that this was going on, where all these people could not stand the fact that I was openly conservative and running a blog called the Generation Y Conservative, that I never mentioned school issues on because I didn't believe in mixing the two. While that was happening and they were working to get me off of the board because of my viewpoint, I was actively saying to members of the community that I actually and honestly appreciated the 2 or 3 liberals that were on the school board with me at the time, because it opened my mind to the opposing viewpoints and allowed me to take different perspectives and weigh my options a little bit more as a board member that would effectively make decisions that impacted the lives of students, faculty, bus drivers, and everyone else involved in the school district, including the parents and taxpayers. So, it's interesting, and that all feeds right back into the point I was making about the college campuses, that if you're not given opposing viewpoints, you can't understand the way that the world works and argue your viewpoint successfully. Because if you don't know the opposing viewpoints, you only have one leg to stand on. So I just found that interesting coming from them. So let's see here. The Blaze also pointed out some other campus incidents besides the Evergreen University. Back in April, students at Pomona College in California blocked Speaker Heather McDonald from giving a lecture, claiming that she was spreading racism and bigotry. The students also physically blocked the entrance to the building where she was to speak and pushed back anyone who wandered too close. This also happened within the last year to Milo Yiannopoulos, who was on UC Berkeley's campus, and when he went to speak there, he had to stay in his hotel room because they were flipping over cars, setting things on fire, and actively blocking him from getting into the campus. And this is what was considered the breeding grounds of free speech on campuses, was at UC Berkeley, and it just shows you how far we've actually come. Back in May, we also had students at the University of California in Santa Cruz who took over a building on campus and barred the doors with chains and furniture. The students said they would occupy the building until a list of demands had been met. The students also threatened to take over more buildings on the campus should the college administration fail to cave to their demands. Throw them out on their asses, get them out of the school, they don't deserve to be there, and keep the money, too. This is so ridiculous that we have students who are supposed to be paying to receive an education that then go and feel that they are entitled to dictate what that education is. What they should have done is a little bit more research and try to find a college that caters to the type of education that they're hoping that these colleges kowtow to for them to teach them instead. They might want to try looking in Venezuela and Cuba for starters, maybe communist China. They can check out the education systems over there before they start poo-pooing in their diapers over what's going on here and trying to demand things be done for them. Okay, moving out of politics for just a little bit here. Todd Westby, CEO of 3 Square Market, says that, quote, installing microchips in employees is the right thing to do. 3 Square Market will be the first firm in the U.S. to implant a rice-sized microchip device in the hands of their employees, which was approved by the FDA in 2004. Back in 2004. That's 13 years ago at this point. CEO Todd Westby had said this in an interview with CNBC on Monday this week. We think it's the right thing to do for advancing innovation, just like the driverless car basically did in recent months. This is what Westby said. I'm going to disagree with you there. Right now, we have the most innovative person out there, being Elon Musk, who is warning us against the advances that are being taken in AI, okay? And not that this is directly related, but we are doing building blocks upon each other with the advances in technology and everything. And I find it fascinating that someone like Elon Musk, who should be at the forefront of what's going on with AI, saying that we are setting up a scenario where there's going to be chaos, that AI and robots could start doing things that we don't want them to do. When you put an artificial intelligence into something and they have the ability to access the internet and learn from things in history, which is basically recorded history based on the opinions of people in a lot of cases, that they start to form their own decisions based on that, you run into a bad situation. And a lot of people joke about Terminator and Skynet and everything. But here's the thing. This actually also does feed back into some of the topics that we've talked about before as well, which is the morals and principles of the right and left. We talked about the difference between what Bill Clinton did in the Oval Office and what someone like the Republican senator that was playing footsie in the men's bathroom, which was a sign for gay sex. That when you stand upon universal truths, which are truths from God, then there's a weight to it, right? But when you don't stand on morals and principles, someone like Bill Clinton, who's getting blowjobs in the Oval Office, when he gets caught after so much time of the left arguing, well, he's not doing that, and we're saying that he is, and he's lying, no, he's not lying, and you go back and forth, and then finally it does come out, yes, I was lying. It comes down to a point where people are so exhausted from having to argue back and forth that they're like, oh, well, who cares? Yeah, okay, he did it. He said he did it. He finally, owned up to it. Give him a break. It's not that big of a deal. It was just a blowjob. Well, yeah, because at this point you've defeated the issue so long over a span of time of trying to argue this point on whether it actually was valid or not, that it got to the point where it no longer holds weight in the eyes of the people that were trying to defend the president at that time. So, okay, it was just a blowjob, it wasn't sex. Well, then the rape allegations started coming out. It just gets to this ridiculous level. So the point being that if we are sitting here talking about artificial intelligence and being based on universal truths, I think we as a society need to agree on what universal truth is. Is murder wrong? It seems like a simple question, but in a few years, will it be? Is helping someone in certain areas of life a good thing to do? Look in the case of Charlie Gard. If we come to a time where robots are fully capable of understanding and performing medical treatments and no doctors are involved anymore except for as working on behalf of programmers on how exactly to do treatments, then does a robot have the ability with AI involved to decide if someone like Charlie Gard should have the right to live and be automatically disconnected from a life support system? So I don't necessarily believe that the advances in technology right now that I've gotten way off topic with these microchips being involved, I don't necessarily believe that advances in technology are always on the front of being good. So according to the CNBC interview, the company which provides technology for break room markets or mini market kiosks, they are anticipating over 50 employees to be voluntarily chipped. The chip costs $300 per implant. It's inserted with a needle between the thumb and forefinger, so right about here if you're watching on video right now, and barely hurts at all, is what the CEO said. Once an employee has the chip installed, he or she can purchase food in the break room, open doors, and log into computers. It's RFID, so basically have to be about 6 inches away from something and kind of swipe in front of it. A lot of phones are equipped with this type of technology now. When you do pay at the pump with your phone or use your iPhone with iPay at cashier stands and everything, that's essentially what is going into your hand then. Westby said that there is no way for employees to be tracked because this is an RFID, it's not an actual GPS location device. Unlike your cell phone that is trackable and traceable pretty much no matter where you are, this device is only readable if you are within 6 inches of a proximity reader. So the question is, would you do it? Would you actually voluntarily opt for being implanted with an RFID chip on the company's behalf to be able to order something for lunch seamlessly, or open doors in the facility, or log into your computer? Personally, for me, the answer is no. I'm not going to... give me a lanyard with a pass on it. And the difference between me going like this and me taking my lanyard or even one of those stretch out things and waving it is one little extra step. There's no reason for this. And the other question I have for you is, why would you allow your employer to modify your body at all for anything? This is driving me nuts. And to be honest with you, a lot of people on the social media site, the Facebook page for me, agree with me that this is just ridiculous. They don't understand why this is happening, and that this company is overstepping its boundary, even if it is voluntary. But you can certainly head over to my page and comment along if you haven't already, and give me your thoughts on the matter as well, or comment below the video. So according to Bearing Arms, which is a website I found this on, 27-year-old Melania Capitan, I think it is. I wasn't a follower of hers, but she's a well-known hunter that ran a blog and social media for her followers. She has committed suicide after receiving an endless stream of violent threats that were made towards her and I believe her family as well. After being hounded and threatened on social media by animal rights activists, Capitan reportedly committed suicide Wednesday to end the harassments, and sources are saying that the young huntress left a note for friends before ending her life in response to the bullying, which didn't end after her death either. One person actually wrote after her death, "She's finished the lives of many animals and no one defended the death of them. I think our lives are worth the same as theirs." Another person said, in a little bit more cruel of a way, "You have done a favor to humanity. Bye-bye." So was Melania doing anything illegal? The answer is actually no. And as a matter of fact, despite what these animal activists would like to believe, hunting is in place for conservation efforts. Overpopulation of certain animals in areas, especially in regards to things like deer, causes a lot more car accidents, and it actually ruins the nature around it by overpopulating. So, the left would, or the animal rights activists might argue my point on more car accidents and hitting these things because this is taking into account something that is in regards to interference in the human nature. But when you actually look at the environment around the areas where these hunting licenses are given out and everything, an overpopulation of some of these animals actually destroys nature and throws off the whole balance of the food chain for animals as well. Personally, myself, I'm not a hunter, but I am a Second Amendment supporter and a supporter of hunting as well. I wouldn't mind going hunting sometime. I just never had the opportunity. But I have talked to hunters before, and I have heard their arguments on conservation efforts and everything, and I agree with it. I think that it's a very good point, and these animal rights activists, it's disgusting the way that they're acting, and there's some more of it in here. I also said that I'm sure that those that did this bullying are the same ones that would then turn around and scold others for their bullying of people that hold different beliefs. I'm sure that they would blame a suicide on their side on the bulliers, so I can only assume and do the same for them here. They are responsible for this girl's death. If you really want to see the darkest corners of society, you can take a look at the comments of the mentally ill on the Anti-Fur Society Facebook page, where they posted the article and applauded and celebrated this young woman's death. So, we've been talking about this for a couple months now. It's been a very interesting time period, because what we typically have seen on the left is this mentality that they like to project of caring, nurturing, tolerant people, but that curtain has been pulled back. And I think what's fascinating about that is that they don't realize the detriment that they're causing to their party. It's not showing right now, but this will play out over time as being the downfall of this type of mentality that the left is projecting right now, which is you're starting to see statistically younger generations being more socially accepting, but conservative in a lot more areas as well. The upcoming generation after the millennial generation is a lot more conservative in many, many ways, because they're looking at the activities of their brothers and sisters or their parents as being monstrous and childlike. I mean, when you have children looking at their parents who are acting more immature than the children themselves out in the streets through violent protests and asking for safe spaces and stuff, it's going to have an effect on society, and it's going to really turn off the upcoming generations. So keep an eye out for that type of stuff. Melania, again, our prayers are with your family and for you as well. So many of you may have been happy earlier this week when news broke that the Senate had voted in regards to the repeal of Obamacare, but unfortunately, the details of that vote are a sorry view of our current affairs within Congress. The vote was actually just a vote to discuss the repeal, not to actually repeal. So what they voted on and got passed was they voted on, do we want to discuss and debate this repeal of the healthcare bill? And the yeas had it. So they voted to discuss something, which is what Congress is supposed to be doing anyway. It's so ridiculous that they would vote to just discuss this. They hold the majority in the House and the Senate, and they also hold the executive branch as well as a good portion of the Supreme Court as well. The vote was three Republican senators early this morning voted the skinny repeal legislation, meant as the last-ditch effort to fulfill the promises made by Republicans to their constituents to repeal Obamacare. The three Republicans that voted against the bill came from Senator John McCain of Arizona, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Susan Collins of Maine. Now, to Susan Collins' credit, Susan Collins has always said that she's not in favor of repealing Obamacare. So her constituents knew that when they voted for her, or they voted for her without doing the actual research into their candidate to see if that's how she actually felt. So that falls on their shoulders anyway. Now, the skinny repeal was actually really only removing unconstitutional portions of Obamacare and leaving a lot of it in place. That also included specifically, when it comes to unconstitutionality, the individual mandate that forced people to buy into the healthcare system or pay a fine. And there's no point in us getting into the details of what that exactly entails tonight, because we've talked about this in the past, but it's unconstitutional to force people to buy something to support the overall system. So it would actually remove the individual mandate as well as some other regulations in regards to it as well. Well, Senator Rand Paul, the Republican of Kentucky, tweeted his disappointment, saying, "This week I voted multiple times to repeal Obamacare, including offering my own clean repeal bill. The Senate fell one vote short tonight, which is disappointing. I intend to keep fighting for a repeal." Now, here's what's interesting about this. President Trump has said that he wants Obamacare repealed, and he has left it in the hands of Congress. our representatives that were put there to repeal this bill on campaign promises, the ones that voted no over the last 2 weeks, should be thrown out on their butts. There are multiple senators who back in 2015 voted to repeal the Obamacare legislation, but then under the guise of knowing that President Obama was actually going to veto that anyway if it did pass. But then now, when they were given the opportunity to vote and repeal it again, there were some that didn't want to vote to repeal it. So that's lying to their constituents. People that campaigned for them, donated money to them based on the false promise that they were actually going to repeal this horrible piece of legislation that has increased premiums and deductibles for families beyond financial reason. There's multiple cases out there all the time. I've given my personal cases about my children being uninsured for 3 months because the state and federal government couldn't decide and argued back and forth that each of the other one was responsible for my kids' health care. Our insurance within one summer was actually bounced back and forth between multiple different plans 6 times because the insurance companies kept on dropping our coverage in regards to what was being covered because they didn't feel that the plan was good enough anymore, or not even good enough, but that it wasn't a viable plan anymore that they wanted to support. So this legislation is horrible. People are seeing that they're paying for their families upwards of about $1,500 a month in premiums, and then on top of that, they're paying, a deductible of $5,000 to $10,000 before their insurance even kicks in on that. And that's ridiculous. Imagine paying $1,500 a month for 12 months, and then on top of that, something goes wrong, and you have to pay another $10,000 just before the insurance even kicks in. That's really ridiculous. I didn't do the math on it. I didn't figure it out, but that's pretty scary for those people that live under that circumstance, that their health care isn't even worth anything to them. So here's where I was going with that. President Trump wants this repealed. The Congress says that they want it repealed, but they didn't vote to repeal it. Now, one of the biggest complaints that I had of President Obama in the first 2 months of his presidency was the fact that this guy was pushing executive orders like it was candy, okay? And I have a real problem with executive orders on both sides. It was my biggest complaint for him. Executive orders are being able to bypass Congress and actually push something through. President Obama was a big perpetrator of pushing executive orders. And so I was hoping that President Trump would be going against that and actually doing something to remedy it. Now, to President Trump's credit, a lot of the executive orders that he pushed through were to get rid of some of the executive orders that Obama pushed through. But now that we're past this phase of pushing executive orders like crazy, I'm actually willing to revisit that with regards to Obamacare. If this is so important to President Obama to repeal Obamacare, why doesn't he push a executive order that would actually do that and bypass Congress, who's letting their people down, their constituents, and actually do what he said he was going to do for the American people? At least we can end up with one politician that's living up to the promises that he was elected on. So I don't know what the procedure would be for an executive order to repeal something like Obamacare. I don't know if it's possible, but I would think that this is something that President Trump needs to look into to bypass a Congress that has failed the American people. On top of that, there was something else I was thinking about here. Doesn't matter. So, as the week of repeal talk started off, Senator John McCain, who recently underwent surgery to remove a blood clot behind his left eye and was subsequently told that it was discovered that he has tumors on his brain, returned to the Senate floor to vote in the process and give a speech to his colleagues. Before we get into that, this is actually what I wanted to say. John McCain, who's one of the 3 that did not vote to repeal Obamacare, also happens to be one of the senators of a state who is suffering under the oppressiveness and rising cost of Obamacare itself. Arizona citizens are having nosebleeds because of the premiums and deductibles on their insurance. So of all people, all senators to actively go against the repeal of Obamacare, John McCain has let down his state specifically and the American people as a whole, very much so. So let's actually take a look at some of the highlights from John McCain's speech. I have a couple videos. I didn't take his whole speech, which was about 15 minutes long. I didn't do that. I broke it up into little sections that I actually had comments for. So let's take a look at John McCain and his speech from the floor.
Our responsibilities are important, vitally important to the continued success of our republic. And our arcane rules and customs are deliberately intended to require broad cooperation to function well at all.
Okay, so what he's saying there is that the rules of the Senate are arcane and that we need to collaborate more with the left as people on the right to get things passed. I'm not going to disagree with McCain here, but each side has always been stubborn over the last couple of years and hasn't worked together really since, I would say, the beginning of the turn of this century, even possibly back during the contract with America under Newt Gingrich. So his point about working with the other side is well taken. I agree with him and disagree with him. Unfortunately, no senators voted for repeal on the left, even though they know that their constituents are actively being damaged by this legislation. So let's keep on going with McCain here.
Our deliberations today, not just our debates, but the exercise of all of our responsibilities, authorizing government policies, appropriating the funds to implement them, exercising our advice and consent role, are often lively and interesting. They can be sincere and principled, but they are more partisan, more tribal, more of the time than at any time that I can remember.
Again, McCain's right. We have gotten into a hostile environment lately on both sides of the aisle because we've ratcheted up the rhetoric with each other. And we're now seeing the consequences of a constituency on both sides that were voting based on fear and hatred towards the other opposing party and person running against their own party. President Trump played into the fears and anger of the American people and tapping into that vein to play on that and get his voters to go against Obamacare, against illegal immigration, as well as some other key issues that they played right into. And Hillary Clinton's people were even worse. They played on that it's the same old routine from the left. She played on the fears and anger of a constituency that is repeatedly told that anybody who opposes their viewpoint are racist, bigots, homophobes, sexists, and every other name under the book without any actual facts to back that up, besides taking offense to some things. And that's about it. They can rarely point out actual verbiage that lends credence to those words. And on top of that, you had Hillary Clinton that was playing into the fears of the American people on Trump himself. So it's just ridiculous. Let's keep on going with John McCain here.
And on our nobility. It accounts for our imperfections and gives us an order to our individual strivings that has helped make ours the most powerful and prosperous society on earth. It is our responsibility to preserve that. And even when it requires us to do something less satisfying than winning, even when we must give a little to get a little, even when our efforts managed just 3 yards in a cloud of dust while critics on both sides denounce us for timidity, for our failure to try.
Oh, okay. I'm going to throw up a red flag here. Number one, McCain, you are timid and you have not represented your people, and this is just an obvious case of this week not being able to represent the people within your own districts in Arizona who are starving for you to repeal Obamacare. You are in there. You start off this part of this section of this speech here by talking about we are not royalty. Well, you sure as hell act like you're royalty. You've been in the Senate now for 30 years, and you're one of the reasons why people like me argue for term limits. So you have done nothing for the American people over the last couple years specifically. You certainly were a hero in your own right in the military and everything, and I respect you for your service. In recent years, I've heard some different things about what actually happened at the Hanoi, that if true that your nickname among your fellow prisoners was Songbird, and the reasoning behind that makes me sick to my stomach, as well as what you've been doing here with the American people and not supporting them. So let's keep on going with some of McCain's speech here.
I hope we can again rely on humility, on our need to cooperate, on our dependence on each other, to learn how to trust each other again, and by so doing better serve the people who elected us. Stop listening to the bombastic loudmouths on the radio and television and the internet. To hell with them.
So here's what's really interesting about John McCain talking about the bombastic voices on the internet and TV and radio. Number one, the media has failed this nation as a watchdog for the public in regards to what's going on in Washington, D.C. They no longer are an unbiased voice to bring you the news. In most cases, even in regards to Fox News, it's biased commentary that does little to address the facts of what's going on and is heavily weighted in the opinion of people to garner attention and ratings. Now, the people that he's specifically railing against, those on the internet and the radio and television, I'm going to happen to disagree with you here, McCain, and throw another red flag for you, because these are the people that have done more for the voice of the American people and hold people like you accountable than the media, who was supposed to be doing it the whole time. The reason why people in commentary on radio and television can continue to do so is because they have the ability to back it up with advertisers that are paying because the people that listen to them keep on buying the products. And if the people weren't listening to the radio station and finding out who these advertisers were, they wouldn't be doing so because they don't have a vested interest in what's being said. These are people that I hope to include myself in, that become a voice for the American public that you're just not hearing. You are living in a bubble in Washington, D.C., and are completely void of the concept of what's going on in middle America and happening with the American people and what they're actually concerned about.
They don't want anything done for the public good. Our incapacity is their livelihood.
I cut off a little bit early there. He said our incapacity is their livelihood, as in the people that commentate on it. Well, no, actually, the incapacity on your part and the other senators and Congress and the president, government as a whole, and at an incapacity is the best thing to happen to the American people. When you're not doing something, you're not screwing us over with over-regulation and over policy making that every day affects our daily lives and puts more and more restraints on the American public. Even when the sides believe that they're doing good for the American people, that comes with enough red tape to keep us chained down and into a subservient society to the types of policies that you're pushing. So let's keep going.
Good. Let's trust each other. Let's return to regular order. We've been spinning our wheels on too many important issues because we keep trying to find a way to win without help from across the aisle. That's an approach that's been employed by both sides mandating legislation from the top down without any support from the other side, with all the parliamentary maneuvers that requires. We're getting nothing done, my friends. We're getting nothing done.
Hey, ding, 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 you're getting nothing done. No kidding. And actually, that holds true to what you actually did this week, which is getting nothing done for the American people that were relying on you. And again, in most cases, doing nothing is actually a good thing for the American public. But in this case, it happens to be one of those policies that not doing something on in regards to repealing it is actually hurting the American public even worse than if you were to leave it alone.
And all we've really done this year is confirm Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court.
So, yeah, Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, and he seems pretty upset with that. As of right now, looking back at the accomplishment of President Trump, this is actually the best thing that has happened in the administration so far. If no other promises get lived up to in his first term, and I say that because the left keeps on shooting themselves in the foot with the media and everything else that they're pushing out on the internet, with all the fake news and their attacks on the Trump family and everything. Keep it up and he's going to win another term and you guys are going to be shocked. But if nothing else, the Supreme Court appointment of Neil Gorsuch was a massive win for conservatives and for the Constitution in general, or specifically, I should say.
Our healthcare insurance system is a mess. We all know it. Those who support Obamacare and those who oppose it. Something has to be done. We Republicans have looked for a way to end it and replace it with something else without paying a terrible political price. We haven't found it yet, and I'm not sure we will. All we've managed to do is make more popular a policy that wasn't very popular when we started trying to get rid of it. I voted for the motion to proceed to allow debate to continue and amendments to be offered. I will not vote for this bill as it is today. It's a shell of a bill right now. We all know that. I have changes urged by my state's governor that will have to be included to earn my support for final passage of any bill.
He will not do it. He only voted for a discussion. So, can't stand people like this. Yeah, so he voted for a discussion, which is jack squat in regards to actually helping out the American people. And I think it's an upcoming clip, but we're going to actually get to a little bit more details in regards to some of the things that I've said in the past in regards to how the Democrats pushed Obamacare down our throat, and as a comparison to how the Republicans are trying to push a crappy health care bill down our throat as well. I believe that's coming up within the next few here, so let's keep going.
To support it. We've tried to do this by coming up with a proposal behind closed doors in consultation with the administration, then springing it on skeptical members, trying to convince them that it's better than nothing. That it's better than nothing? Asking us to swallow our doubts and force it past a unified opposition. I don't think that's going to work in the end, and probably shouldn't. The administration and congressional Democrats shouldn't have forced through Congress without any opposition support a social and economic change as massive as Obamacare. And we shouldn't do the same with ours.
And probably shouldn't. So, this is a point that I actually brought up a couple weeks ago in the podcast here, which is the fact that the left has been going crazy over the idea that the Republicans are doing this behind closed doors, and how could they? And the politicians are making a big side circus show over the fact that it's being done in the dark of night, and these Republicans are being sneaky and not transparent, and how could they do that? As a matter of fact, who was the Connecticut senator that I kept on railing against in regards to health care? Chris Murphy. He was one of the ones that said, my constituents would fall under this too. They have every right and deserve to know what's going on in this bill. Well, where the hell were you when Obamacare was passed? Because you're getting mad at the Republicans for doing the same thing that your side did when Obamacare was passed. You went into the dark at night. You went behind closed doors. You didn't include Republicans in the process. You did the exact same thing. Now, where I'm going to agree with Senator McCain on this is that it's hypocritical for both sides. If it was wrong for the Democrats to do it, the Republicans shouldn't be doing it right now with their crappy health bill. If the Democrats are upset with the way that the Republicans are doing it, they shouldn't have set a precedent back in 2008 and 2009 by doing it themselves either. Okay, and the fact that the right is springing this healthcare bill on an unsuspecting Congress and only giving a couple days to read it, well, I can tell you right now that the main portion of the Obamacare bill was about 2,500 pages long in regards to Obamacare itself, with an additional up to 20,000 pages that had to be moved by hand truck across a stage or wherever it goes on the American public and in Congress, and that was only given a couple days. Well, there's a big difference there. And if you think that any of the Congress people on both sides were able to read that bill in an appropriate set period of time before it's passing, you're absolutely wrong. The Democrats didn't read it either. As a matter of fact, Nancy Pelosi said we have to pass the bill to find out what's in the bill.
The success of the Senate is important to the continued success of America. This country, this big, boisterous, brawling, intemperate, restless, striving, daring, beautiful, bountiful, brave, good, and magnificent country needs us to help it thrive. That responsibility is more important than any of our personal interests or political affiliation. We are the servants of a great nation, a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Okay, so he's talking about how the Senate and people like himself are servants to the American public. But that's not how American politics has been lately. And this is what I hope we would be able to return to at some point, is this. It's led to the election of Donald Trump as president. This celebrity status for politicians, it really took off under Obama, where all the left, including some of my friends that refer to him as having all this swagger and how great he is and like what an icon he is and everything. It's elevating a person on a pedestal to a celebrity status that is supposed to be subservient to the American people to represent them. We keep on moving away from the notion that we escaped from England and the monarchy that we were under over there to set up a free nation over here. And now we're starting to regress and move backwards towards elevating our president to a nobility, a monarchy, if you will, in the making. And the fact that we treat these people like kings has led to the celebrity status of what's going on in America, and it's really disturbing. So John McCain is one of the worst perpetrators of this and has not served the American people, especially his own constituents, for quite some time now, by the lack of actual big things that he's done for the people that have elected him for over 30 years now.
History. We have been the greatest example, the greatest supporter, and the greatest offender of that order. We aren't afraid. We don't covet other people's land and wealth. We don't hide behind walls. We breach them. We are a blessing to humanity.
Oh my gosh. Talk about self-important and just patting yourself on the back. It's amazing to me. I could not stop laughing the first time I saw him go, "We are a blessing," and just start stroking his stomach. It's like these people believe that, they honestly believe that they are a blessing to the American people when they have caused nothing but misery on both sides of the aisle to the American people. Over the years, we have seen our society deteriorate and become horrible in different aspects because of overregulation from these senators who believe that they're doing the right thing, but actually screw things up even more. And that's coming from both sides. Don't think that I'm picking on liberal politicians here. McCain is one of the biggest perpetrators of this. He is a progressive Republican who has done a lot of harm to this country as senator, and him Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, and Susan Collins and a bunch of other ones should be ousted. They should be thrown out on their butts, and we need new, fresh blood that believes in term limits. That's all there is to it. And until we receive term limits for these people who only vote in their best interests to stay in power, we're never going to get things done in this country that's right for the American people. And that's on both sides of the aisle. Here's the conclusion of his speech.
That divide us. What a great honor and extraordinary opportunity it is to serve in this body. It's a privilege to serve with all of you. I mean it. Many of you have reached out in the last few days with your concern and your prayers, and it means a lot to me. It really does. I've had so many people say such nice things about me recently that I think some of you must have me confused with someone else. I appreciate it, though, every word, even if much of it isn't deserved. I'll be here for a few days. I hope managing the floor debate on the defense authorization bill, which I'm proud to say is again a product of bipartisan cooperation and trust among the members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. After that, I'm going home for a while to treat my illness. I have every intention of returning here and giving many of you cause to regret all the nice things you said about me. And I hope to impress on you again that it is an honor to serve the American people in your company. Thank you, fellow senators. Mr. President, I yield.
Okay, before we move on to our next topic, so what McCain was talking about there is that he threw in some humor, which was nice, and he was funny. He had some really funny things to say, and I think people appreciated that. But overall, he did let the American people down this week, and that's what was most disturbing, really, when you think about it. And so, I don't know. It's just that he was talking about the trust of the Senate and how we need to trust the Senate more and everything, but they have done nothing to earn that trust from us anymore. And the fact is, I don't know. McCain has let the American people down. And there's been a lot of disgusting comments out there in regards to his health situation from both people on the right and left that are sick of his crap. I wish Senator McCain all the best in his healing and everything, but I have believed for a very long time now that it's time for him to go. Take care of yourself and let someone else take over your position that can actually help out the American people and live up to the promises that you have been promising them for quite some time now. Okay, so we're going to move on from Senator McCain's speech on the floor there. In a topic that ties into our main topic for the night, the Huffington Post is celebrating what they call a powerful photo that shows that men get periods too, apparently. So let's go to, I'll bring up this image, unfortunately, for you here. There you go. So this is an image that was posted by someone, and let me get the details here. According to the Huffington Post, a transgender artist released a powerful photo last week in an attempt to broaden the cultural understanding of the different types of people who experience menstruation. Cass Clemmer, who uses they, them pronouns, so you know they're on my crap list already, posted the photo of themselves on Instagram on July 12th, depicting them free bleeding while holding up a sign that reads, "Periods are not just for women, #bleeding while trans." The photo was accompanied by a poem the artist wrote for a spoken word event at a menstrual health conference last year. And it starts off with this. I'm sorry to do this to you. Y'all know I'm trans and queer, and what that means for me all around is something that's neither there nor here. It's a happy, scary middle ground. So when I talk gender inclusion, and I wrote these rhymes to help you see, I'm not trying to, great English there, bring up something shallow. Periods are honestly pretty traumatic for me. See, my life is very clearly marked like a red border cut up a nation. which doesn't make sense. A time before and a time beyond the mark of my first menstruation. So let me take you back to the details that I can still recall of the day I gained my first period and the day that I lost it all. No thanks, I've had enough of that, thank you. Here's the thing in regards to this kind of stuff. This is not hurting me, this transgender person, so I don't really care. They can live their life however they want. It doesn't come down to what people want to do with their lives. I've been in arguments with people. I've publicly gone against certain situations that transgenders are involved with. Unfortunately, two issues get conflated into that, which is the trans community and supporters of the trans community want to argue that you're being mean towards and offending the trans community, when a lot of people on the opposing argument are actually arguing more about safety issues, especially in regards to public bathrooms and schools and stuff like that. We've talked about that before, which is that it's not so much the trans people that in most cases you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. If I walked into a bathroom and a trans man walked in behind me, I wouldn't know the difference, and I frankly wouldn't care. But when you have such an open spoken policy that allows anyone to walk into the bathroom that they just openly identify with at any given time, because there's so many different genders, of which includes gender fluidity, which means that any given minute you can identify as whatever the heck you want, it opens the doors to misuse and abuse of the bathroom and locker room situations, where people that are sick in the head can take advantage of that, and that doesn't lend toward something being wrong on the part of the trans community that's involved in that. It's on the part of the people that are making these policies that are just spoken policies that don't have any deeper policy within it, regulating how and exactly someone can be using these bathrooms. I mean, something like as simple as you just have to look like you belong in there, for crying out loud. Sorry about that. We'll see here. Clemmer, who works as a menstrual health activist, told the Huffington Post that they decided to stage the photo after the backlash to the adventures of Tony the Tampon, a period coloring book. It comes with 4 red crayons, by the way. A project that they created to introduce kids of all genders to the human experience of menstruation. Clemmer's menstrual health activism also extends into the publishing world, having created their own publishing entity called Bloody Queer Publishing. Their work of Tony the Tampon will also continue, with Clemmer planning to take a road trip with the character to keep making people laugh and smile while smashing the period taboo. It's pretty disgusting. Yeah. First of all, let's just talk about regular women, okay? It's embarrassing for them when they have an incident like that shown in the picture of this trans man having a period. They're trying to make this not so disgusting, I guess. I don't really understand why there's this work of this Tony the Tampon to make people laugh and smile on something that's personal, and it is disgusting. I'm sorry, but it is. The photo is disgusting, and not because of the transgender portion of it. I don't care who that person is in the photo at all, or what they have going on. Honestly, I don't care either way how you want to live, as long as it doesn't impose on my rights or my family's rights. Especially if I'm going to get in trouble while trying to navigate your minefield of appropriate gender pronouns. But no matter what message you're trying to get across, the open legs with blood seeping through your pants is gross. A lot of people are squirmish about seeing any blood, and you would gross someone out with a picture of a paper cut on a finger. But this, I mean, come on now, it's just ridiculous. So after completing a extensive and exhausting survey this week, that literally took me absolutely no time at all, I can conclusively say that all of the men surveyed, none have ever menstruated. So that's just a in-depth survey that I put myself through that took no time at all. Now, trans men, maybe that's something different, but I'm sorry, the anatomy is completely different, and men don't menstruate. So your sign is a little bit off and not right. So, in our final topic tonight, which actually crosses over with that topic, President Trump tweeted this week that transgender individuals have no place in the military. In a series of tweets Wednesday morning, President Donald Trump announced a ban on transgender people serving in the U.S. military in, quote, any capacity. His tweets, which were 3 in total, read out, "After consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will no longer accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgenders in the military would entail. Thank you." Under former Defense Secretary Ash Carter, the military was actually set to begin accepting transgender service members on July 1st as a result of an Obama-era policy established in June of 2016 last year. But since October, transgender troops already in the military have been able to receive medical care and begin formally transitioning to their desired gender identities in the Pentagon's database. As it stands, there are roughly 250 service members in the process of transitioning right now. So let's actually take a look. I'm actually more interested in other people's opinions on this, because this kind of actually feeds back into directly what I was saying about being on the school board, which is I like to do a lot more listening on things like this than actual opining on them to get a different perspective of what's going on. I think that both sides actually make some really good points. So let's start off by listening to a transgender conservative activist and Trump supporter, Eddie Dixon, who told Allie Stuckley that she supports the president's decision. However, she said, quote, "We should be disqualified at enlistment because we are medically reliant." She said, asserting that transgender people should not have more privileges than diabetics and asthmatics. Trump is doing a great job of protecting the United States and our people, and that is the focus right now, adding, "We need truth and we need safety, not political correctness." Okay, we're going to get back to some of that in a little bit then. Dixon reported that she has been ostracized by many in her Portland, Oregon community for supporting Trump, particularly in the LGBT community. She said she used to identify with liberals until she saw the political left becoming less tolerant of other Americans and more tolerant of faiths that are actively homophobic. On the other side of the argument, Staff Sergeant Logan Ireland railed against President Donald Trump's decision to ban transgender people from serving in the armed forces in a Wednesday interview with Air Force Times. Ireland said, "I would like to see them try to kick me out of my military. You are not going to deny me my right to serve my country when I am fully qualified and able and willing to give my life." He added, "For the president to deny an able-bodied, fully qualified person the inherent right to raise their right hand and serve their country, potentially giving their own life for our freedoms, is doing this country an injustice." Now, again, I'm picking out things here that are in regards to what exactly I feel are good points on both sides. Where I disagree with Ireland is, and I say that he is wrong, is that the military service is not an inherent right. People are denied for many different reasons, ranging all the way back in time, back to when people were denied entry into the service because they had flat feet, for crying out loud. So military service is not an inherent right, so that's where I would disagree. He also said, "I would personally love for my president to meet me so I can tell him about myself." So, some thoughts. As mentioned by Dixon in regards to being medically reliant, what happens when you are serving at war and are unable to access proper medications, which I would imagine would extend into hormone therapy for a lot of people? It's a question to ask. What about qualifications? Do transgenders have to meet the military physical requirements of the gender that they identify with or their born sex? Now, listen to this. physically, we are seeing trans women dominating women's sports because their bodies are built differently and have higher amounts of testosterone pumping through them. In the case of trans men, wouldn't the physical requirements, which are different than the military requirements for women, be set too high? But aren't they set to ensure that those watching the backs of their fellow soldiers are able to perform basic survival tasks that also include the welfare of a trench mate, possibly requiring them to carry out another injured soldier? So we're talking about trans men here, women that have transitioned to men. Are they able to meet the physical requirements of men, not so much as to protect themselves and be fully capable themselves, but also when your fellow trench mate is relying on you to pull them out of a situation where they may become injured, can they physically do it? Let's see here. If this was not a decision by the president, wouldn't the most responsible action taken by the military be that all transgender individuals must be able to perform the requirements of men in the military? Of course, then you get into heated arguments about fairness from the advocates for the transgender community. So here's what we're saying here. What I'm saying is, first of all, when you're talking about trans men, you're talking about females that have transitioned into men and don't have the same type of structure, bone structure, muscle mass structure, and physical capabilities that men are inherently born with in most cases to be able to perform the functions. But when you're talking about trans women, you're also talking about men that have transitioned into being a woman that can dominate those types of things, right? So my question here is, why aren't they all held to the standard of men's physical requirements in military service? I think that's the best way to go to ensure that these people are ready and able to enter a war environment. It has nothing to do with who they are. It's about what they can do, which isn't that what we're supposed to be focusing on anyway? Morning show host Doc Thompson made the point that the reason why uniforms are called as such is because the military should be free of distractions and all soldiers should be uniform in how they look and act. A sore thumb sticking out draws attention from fellow soldiers and enemies alike in ways that are dangerously distracting. Doc also mentioned the previous don't ask, don't tell policy. I mentioned that a look at me and treat me differently and special and respect my lifestyle demands of individuals works against that uniform mentality, but also conceded that those who out members of the LGBT community are wrong in doing so, and that the outed individual should not be tossed out because of that. As a matter of fact, I think that the person who ousted the individual under a don't ask, don't tell policy should be the one that's thrown out because they're being a distraction. Radio host Glenn Beck took to the to each his own live and let live mentality, and while voicing some concerns, mainly stuck to the idea that if they are willing and able-bodied to serve their country, who are we to say that their service is less than? Another point that Beck made was that if the transgendered and other LGBT community individuals came out after the ending of the don't ask, don't tell policy, this shows that we have already had those members of our society serving the country. Then what difference does it make going forward? And maybe I jumbled up those words a little bit for you, but essentially what he's saying is we've had gay members of the community serving in the military. We've had those that are transgendered serving in the military. So to Donald Trump's point, what does it matter now if they're serving in the military? If they're able-bodied, able to meet the physical requirements, and able to do their function without sticking out and being a distraction, why wouldn't they be able to serve their country just like anyone else? Another question raised is about the mentality of fellow serving soldiers and how they feel in the showers and changing rooms about this. You can think about that one yourself. That's a question for you. Bill O'Reilly said this afternoon that this announcement seemed to be more of a distraction from the imploding repeal of Obamacare and a red meat tactic to placate to those on the right that are looking for another win. I happen to agree that that's probably a portion of what the president was going for, but I also believe that maybe there's more to it. What confuses me on this issue is that President Trump, when asked during the campaign while running for president, he was asked if transgender people can use the bathrooms that they identify with in his hotels, and he said he didn't have a problem with it. If you actually look at the social policies of President Trump, he's very liberal. He's always been very liberal about those. So it actually surprises me with this. What I personally thought was in bad taste in regards to this whole thing is, number one, whether you agree or disagree with his statement, you can think that that's in bad taste on what he said. But second, and more importantly, that he tweeted this. Why wasn't there a formal announcement? And on top of that, why wasn't General Mattis involved in a press conference to announce this to the American people? Why would you so amateurishly tweet this out as a new type of policy that is going to fire a lot of people up, instead of having an actual press conference with the general to discuss this with the American people? I don't know. My whole thing again on this is I do not have a problem with the trans community. I happen to agree with Beck on the live and let live, as long as it doesn't affect my life. I don't really care. Imposing on the public's life with demanding things like the pronoun game, that's something different. I think it's ridiculous to have to refer to people as them and their and all this other stuff that they require, and if you get it wrong, it's like illegal in some places now. It's so ridiculous. But again, it's I don't understand it. Honestly, I have my reservations on some of the policies that are out there in regards to the trans community and everything, but I have a high respect for the military. I have a high respect for anyone that serves in our military and has taken up a banner to fight for our country and possibly shed their blood for our freedoms and liberties. And I happen to disagree with the president on this in more ways than I agree with him. I believe that these individuals should be able to serve and shed their blood if so willing to help defend our country against foreign and domestic threats and defend our liberties. Where I will agree with the president is in regards to the medical services that we wouldn't offer to other people. I mean, one of the points that was brought up is that elective surgeries like plastic surgery, liposuction, is not covered under the military unless it's going to save a person's life. So in regards to the VA and everything, if a person that's retired out of the military has become so obese that it threatens their life, then liposuction is a viable operation. Now, in regards to the transgender community, if we're going to be talking about the funding of taxpayer money going towards transitional surgeries to transition someone to the opposite sex, is that life-saving? Well, the argument comes up on whether or not an argument can be made that by not doing so, this person would be mentally distraught and suicidal. But when you actually look at the statistics of the suicide rates among transgender individuals, doesn't matter what the circumstances are that feed into that, the statistics are statistics on it. It's pretty high. It's around 50%. But that statistic actually increases once the surgery happens and they actually do transition. So, surprisingly, once they transition and they go into the gender identity that they feel comfortable with, that suicide rate actually increases. So there's an argument to be made on the other side that by performing these surgeries, you're actually not protecting the life of the individual. You're making matters worse for them. So it's something to think about. And I agree and I disagree, but I disagree more with the president than I do agree with him. And I happen to go back to the distraction portion. And if anyone is a distraction in the military through bad behavior, through a look-at-me mentality or respect that I'm different when everybody's supposed to be performing the same task and held to the same standard, no matter who you are or what you identify as, or even if you're not part of the trans community, you should be thrown out on your ass, because we can't rely on you to perform the task of a well-oiled machine if you choose to be a gear that's off independently spinning, not connected to the other gears. That's all there is to it. So I want to thank everyone tonight for joining in on the podcast, or if you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube, I thank you for tuning in. If you want to follow along, as I mentioned before, you can always go to the Generation Y Conservative on Facebook by searching for the Generation Y Conservative. You can also hit like there, share the page, also get notifications for when we do go live during the week with the podcast. Then you can also head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe to that, and also hit the bell to get notifications when videos are published there. Besides the podcast that goes up on the channel, we also have movie reviews, and we'll probably be getting into some more fun stuff as well towards the fall time frame, with some kind of man on the street type stuff that I'm planning out currently. So head over there and subscribe, and also share that YouTube channel with people as well, of like-minded, liberty-minded individuals. You can also follow along and interact with me on Twitter at GenYConservative without the E on the end. I would appreciate that. And get involved with tweeting back and forth with me. I like doing that, and I get involved with some of the radio hosts I actually have connections with too. Also, don't forget that you can find this podcast rebroadcast on Sundays from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLRN Internet Radio, which has also carried me onto iTunes as well. So if you're interested in just listening to the podcast, you can head over to iTunes and search for that and subscribe to that, so you can get the podcast on the go. In the meantime, I appreciate everyone joining me. Have a great night, and God bless America.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Hey, this is John Preston, Marine combat veteran and Pacific Records recording artist. Just reaching out to have you check out our new album, Battle Cry, Songs of America's Heroes, an album featuring phenomenal other combat veteran artists like Scott Brown of the Scooter Brown Band, Ryan Weaver, Rowdy Johnson, just an incredible mix of people. This is all veterans telling our stories and our lives, and we're giving 100% of our proceeds to the Valkyrie Initiative to help veterans and first responders integrate back into society. I myself have battled with post-traumatic stress for many years and lost my own brother, a Marine Corps veteran, to suicide. I ask that you step with us and make this happen. We are in pre-order right now and release on March 17th. Go to iTunes, go to Amazon, buy. We plan on making the charts and making it at a very high level, and your support right now makes a difference. This is the release of my new song, Superman Falls, which is actually about the loss of my own brother, which happened last year, and I would love for everyone to check it out, to listen, and hopefully it'll make a difference in many lives.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course. Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Sometimes riders feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
Here's George Foreman with InventHelp.
Hi, I'm George Foreman. Do you have an idea for a new product or invention? People ask me all the time, George, how do I get my idea in front of companies? How do I get a patent? What do I do next? Do you have the same questions? I'll tell you like I'll tell them all. Call my friends at InventHelp.
Call InventHelp today for free information. InventHelp has been helping inventors for more than 30 years and has sales offices nationwide. InventHelp can submit your invention to companies who are interested in receiving new ideas. If you have an idea and want to try to patent it and submit it to companies, you should call InventHelp today for free information.
Listen, I can't guarantee a company will be interested in your idea, but I believe every inventor deserves the opportunity to step into the ring and take their best shot. Put InventHelp in your corner.
Get your free inventor's information. Call 1-800-353-6490. That's 1-800-353-6490. Again, 1-800-353-6490.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.